What if I told you that the fall of the Roman Empire, the writing of the Ten Commandments, the sudden collapse of the oldest civilizations on Earth, and, well, the fact that you're probably listening to this on a smartphone right now, were all dictated by the exact same physical mechanism?
I mean, it sounds completely like science fiction.
Right. And what if I told you that this mechanism was literally just the physical distance of the moon and the sun from our planet?
It's wild because we are so deeply conditioned to view human history as, a product of our own agency.
Yeah, great.
Like somebody invents a wheel, which leads to a cart, which leads to trade. A
Mhm.
king makes a bad decision, a war breaks out, borders change.
We think we're the ones driving the bus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We view time as this linear hallway that we built ourselves.
And that neat, orderly progression is, it's comforting. But today we are taking a sledgehammer to that museum hallway.
We really are.
We're stepping into a framework of human existence that forces you to completely surrender that human-centric viewpoint. So welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Our mission today is to explore this staggering, highly detailed document that attempts to unify, 6,000 years of human history, the lineages of major world religions, and cutting-edge modern astrophysics into one single cohesive mechanical system.
And it's called the Prakriti Yuga chakra, right? The cycle of nature's eras.
Exactly. And to understand the sheer scale of the sources we're unpacking today, you really have to imagine a master synchronization of ancient and modern data.
Yeah, we are looking at translated materials that map out the rise of the Sumerians, the family tree of Noah, and the construction of the Egyptian pyramids directly alongside massive terrestrial cataclysms.
Things that modern paleoclimatology actually verifies.
Right. And it aligns all of this with the physical movements of celestial bodies and even the magnetic poles of the Milky Way galaxy.
I really want to speak directly to you listening to this right now. If you're a history buff, you are going to hear the timeline of empires framed in a way you've literally never considered.
And if you're a science enthusiast, the astrophysical alignments in this document are going to absolutely blow your mind.
Yeah, or if you're just someone who looks at the chaotic state of the world today, like the climate anomalies, the institutional breakdowns, AI moving so fast, and wonders if there's an underlying logic to it all, well, this deep dive offers a terrifyingly cohesive macro lens.
It basically proposes that the rise of empires and new religions aren't random offshoots of human genius. They are the ticking hands of a cosmic clockwork.
But before we dissect the mechanics of that clock, we really need to establish a clear baseline for our discussion today.
Right, that's crucial. The source material we're examining actively synthesizes figures and narratives from the Bible, the Quran, and the ancient Vedic texts of India.
Blending theology, ancient history, and modern astronomy into one massive theory.
Exactly. It places those theological narratives seamlessly alongside modern scientific observations about climate data, Lagrange points, and galactic radiation.
So our role today is strictly analytical.
Yes, we are not here to endorse any specific religious viewpoint.
Yeah. Right. And we aren't politically validating these historical claims, nor are we measuring the source's astrophysics against mainstream scientific consensus to declare it, objectively true or false.
We're just objectively unpacking the fascinating unified theory presented in this text. We want to explore its internal logic and trace these incredible connections it makes.
The rules of the game are set, so I want to dive straight into the engine room of this theory.
Let's do it.
The document mentions several different cycles of time, but the main event, the one that governs our lives, is the Prakriti Yuga chakra. How does this specific wheel turn? Like, what is the actual fuel running the engine of human history here?
Well, the text provides some crucial cosmological context right away. It says that according to the ancient Puranas, there are multiple time cycles operating at the same time, kind of like concentric rings of a gyroscope.
Okay, so wheels within wheels.
Exactly. You have the Purush element, which tracks massive cycles lasting millions of years. Then you have the Divya Yuga chakra, the divine element, operating on a 12,000-year cycle.
But we aren't looking at those today.
No, the focus of our deep dive, the cycle that physically and psychologically binds human civilization, is strictly the Prakriti Yuga chakra, the cycle of nature.
And the text makes a huge point to specify that this particular cycle is localized, right?
Yeah, it occurs entirely within the physical gravitational bounds of our specific solar system. It's this interactive relationship between the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon.
So how do those planets actually dictate human civilization? We have to unpack its central mechanism. The text introduces this foundational concept called the Daiv.
Right, spelled D-A-A-I-V, the Daiv. The document describes it as a divine or cosmic force.
But I'm trying to visualize this. I mean, are we talking about a literal, measurable wave of energy passing through space, or is it something more, I don't know, esoteric?
It's described as an invisible, omnipresent, energetic influence that permeates the solar system. Think of it as the foundational operating frequency of human consciousness.
Okay, that makes sense.
But the critical twist here is mechanical. The way humanity actually receives and reacts to this daive is entirely dependent on the physical positions of the celestial bodies.
This is where the text turns history into an almost like mechanical engineering problem.
It really is. It's an astrological historical thesis where gravity, proximity, and orbital mechanics directly dictate societal structure.
So as the distances between the Earth, Sun, and Moon shift over thousands of years, the physical pathway of this energy changes.
Exactly. And when that pathway alters, human psychology is globally overwritten.
Wow.
The document argues that the specific distance of the sun or the moon literally dictates whether humanity as a whole organizes into polytheistic societies, monotheistic empires, or, as we'll see later, a totally machine-driven society.
You know, while reading through the source notes, the analogy that kept coming back to me was a planetary scale Wi-Fi router.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Right. Imagine the Daive as the Wi-Fi signal. It's the
Yeah.
internet. It carries the data that builds human society. But Earth is a laptop on a very specific wobbly orbit.
Right, moving through space.
As Earth moves through different rooms of the solar system, it connects to different frequencies of this Wi-Fi network.
So if we drift closer to the sun, our hardware picks up a frequency that runs our collective software one way.
Exactly. And if we swing closer to the moon, we pick up a different frequency. And humanity's collective operating system literally reboots. Suddenly, the way we structure our governments or approach the divine changes completely.
That Wi-Fi analogy captures the core logic beautifully. The signal is constant, but Earth's physical position changes the bandwidth and the routing.
So, with that mechanical understanding in place, let's rewind the clock to the very beginning of this current human cycle.
The foundational era.
Yeah, the text calls this the Satyug, or the Golden Age. We're looking at a chronological window of roughly 4000 BCE to 3200 BCE.
A very specific time frame.
So what is the cosmic Wi-Fi signal doing during this initial period?
Well, during the Satyug, the cosmic state is defined by absolute equilibrium. The text describes Earth as being in the middle.
Like perfectly balanced between everything.
Yes, the celestial bodies are balanced in their distances. Because of this optimal positioning, the Dave connects cleanly and directly into the core of human consciousness without any distortion.
And what's the results of that pure connection?
The resulting psychological drive of this era is characterized by internal expansion. The human imperative is exploration, fanning out, and seeding new life across empty continents.
And the catalyst for this era is an event that almost every listener will recognize. This golden age begins in the direct aftermath of Noah's Great Flood.
Right. And the text frames this era not as the literal biological creation of humans, but as the foundation of the first organized civilizations following a massive planetary-scale aquatic wipeout.
It's the period where Noah's immediate family begins to multiply and disperse.
And within this framework, Noah is explicitly cited as the greatest spiritual guide, the anchor of knowledge for this entire epoch.
It's essentially a planetary factory reset. The floodwaters wipe the Earth's hard drive clean. The slate is totally blank.
And Noah is sitting there with the backup disk of ancient knowledge, ready to reinstall civilization.
I love that. The text actually dives into some intense genealogical detail here, tracing the geopolitical map of the ancient world back to Noah's three sons.
It does. The demographic shifts are mapped directly to those lineages. You have Shem, whose descendants form the foundation of the Semitic and Middle Eastern civilizations.
Okay, the Middle East.
Then Ham, whose lineage drives south and west, expanding into the African and early Egyptian civilizations. And you have Japheth, who becomes the progenitor for populations migrating into European and deeper Asian territories.
But the text does something truly fascinating here with the Asian migration, right? It weaves this Middle Eastern biblical narrative seamlessly into Hindu Puranic lore.
That is one of the most striking syntheses in the entire document. It states that during the Great Flood, a group of 88,000 rishis, highly advanced sages, along with their disciples from a place called Naimisharanya, somehow managed to survive the cataclysm.
I mean, 88,000 is a massive survival colony. It implies a high degree of organization and forewarning.
It really does. The text specifies they survived by migrating extremely high into the Himalayas, escaping the floodwaters.
Wow.
However, it makes very specific claim about their genetic legacy. It states that the direct blood lineages of these 88,000 rishis did not continue into our current modern era, the Kaliyug.
So their physical genetic lines eventually ended.
Yes, but their intellectual and spiritual lines were successfully preserved.
Because the text outlines a convergence point. As Noah's descendants spread eastward and entered the Indian subcontinent, they encountered these surviving Himalayan sages.
That encounter is framed as a crucial knowledge transfer. These ancient rishis imparted pristine, pre-flood Vedic knowledge to the newly arrived descendants of Noah.
And the text claims this specific exchange is what jump-started an incredibly advanced Vedic civilization in India, running perfectly parallel to the new civilizations in the Middle East and Africa.
And if you look at the historical alignments the text provides for this 4000 to 3200 BCE window, the archaeological record actually echoes this narrative of sudden widespread foundation.
Yeah, you have the Sumerian civilization popping up in Mesopotamia around 4000 to 3500 BCE. They're suddenly mastering agriculture.
Inventing the wheel.
Right. And they develop cuneiform script, humanity's first complex writing system. It's an explosion of foundational tech.
Shortly after, around 3100 BCE, King Narmer successfully unites Upper and Lower Egypt, kicking off the early dynastic period. The Nile Valley suddenly coalesces into a unified cultural entity.
And over in India, fueled by that supposed Himalayan knowledge transfer, you see the emergence of the early Harappan or Mehrgar culture.
Exactly, they're transitioning out of basic foraging, mastering Copper Stone Age technology, setting up complex agriculture, and building the first permanent mud brick settlements.
Try to imagine the sheer, pristine scale of this era. I mean, the planet is mostly empty, the climate is balanced, the cosmic signal is clear, and you have these small, focused groups carrying immense knowledge fanning out across the globe.
It is a period of pure, unadulterated foundation building. But the core rule of the Prakriti Yuga Chakra is continuous motion.
Right, nothing stays perfectly balanced forever.
The celestial bodies don't stay in equilibrium. The Earth continues its orbit, the gravitational relationships shift, and the internal expansion of the Satyug has to inevitably transform into something else.
Because humanity fills the map. Once you have people occupying all of the prime real estate along the river valleys, they stop just spreading out.
They start organizing. They start building upward.
Which brings us to the first major transition period outlined in the text, what it calls a Sandhikal.
The Sandhikal is a bridging era. It's the twilight of one specific epoch and the dawn of another, characterized by a mixing of energies.
So this first Sandhikal bridges the Satyug and the incoming Tretayug.
Exactly. The text places this transition roughly between 3200 BCE and 2200 BCE.
And if the Satyug was about spreading out, this 1,000-year transition is completely defined by centralization. This is the era of the mega builders.
The scattered tribal settlements have now matured into massive, highly organized, labor-intensive civilizations.
And the physical achievements of this bridging era literally define our understanding of the ancient world.
The text specifically points to the construction of the Great Pyramids of Giza in Egypt, built roughly between 2600 and 2500 BCE.
I mean, to build the Great Pyramid of Khufu, you are talking about quarrying, transporting, and perfectly aligning over 2 million blocks of stone, some weighing up to 80 tons.
And it wasn't just happening in Egypt. Simultaneously, you have the early urban centers of the Maya civilization taking root in the dense jungles of Mesoamerica, laying down massive stone platforms.
And in the Indian subcontinent, that early agricultural Mehrgar culture evolves into the mature, astonishingly complex phase of the Indus Valley civilization.
We're looking at vast urban centers like Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Lothal, and Dholavira.
You know, the Indus Valley cities always fascinated me because they weren't just big, chaotic collections of houses. They were built on incredibly precise grid systems.
The bricks were baked to standardized ratios.
Yes, they had covered underground drainage systems that were more advanced than what many European cities had in the 18th century. The sheer civic organization is staggering.
Achieving that level of engineering requires intense centralization of political power, massive agricultural surplus, and a singular psychological focus on mastering the physical material world.
And the text suggests this obsession with massive physical structures is the defining hallmark of this cosmic transition.
It does. And while detailing these massive building projects, the text also meticulously tracks the human lineages carrying the core knowledge forward, specifically zooming in on the lineage of Shem, one of Noah's sons.
That genealogy acts as a continuous thread, right?
Yeah, from Shem, the lineage descends to Arphaxad, then to Shelah, Eber, Peleg, Ru, Serug, Nahor, Terah.
and ultimately culminating in the birth of Abraham.
Exactly. But the text presents a major antagonist during this era of builders, someone from a different branch of the family tree who perfectly embodies the arrogance of this era. King Nimrod.
Nimrod, he's identified as the grandson of Ham, right?
Yes. According to the source, Nimrod consolidates immense power, becoming the first truly dictatorial, tyrannical king of Mesopotamia. He commands vast resources and populations.
And what does he do with that centralized power? He embarks on the ultimate building project. He's credited with constructing the Tower of Babel.
The Tower of Babel is the perfect metaphor for this sandy call.
It's humanity, drunk on its own engineering capabilities, attempting to build a physical structure that literally reaches into the heavens. They're trying to conquer the sky with mud bricks.
That obsession sets up the brilliant juxtaposition the text highlights at the end of this era. You have a millennium of unparalleled material achievement. Kings are building literal mountains of stone.
And then, around 2000 BCE, from that quiet, unbroken lineage of Shem, Prophet Abraham emerges onto the world stage.
Abraham isn't an architect of pyramids. He doesn't command armies of stonemasons. He is a builder of ideas.
He introduces a concept that is entirely alien to the material obsession of the era. He brings forth the doctrine of absolute monotheism.
A single, invisible, omnipotent, non-physical God.
To a world deeply entrenched in the worship of physical idols, massive stone temples, and living kings who demand to be worshipped as deities, Abraham introduces a radical ideological shift.
He establishes the spiritual pillar of monotheism, just as the physical monuments of the builders reach their absolute zenith.
The contrast is just beautiful, but the text makes it clear that this era of mega builders doesn't just fade away because someone introduced a new philosophy.
No, you cannot build a brick wall against the sky.
Right. If the Earth's climate suddenly turns off the faucet, all those perfect brick grids in the Indus Valley become nothing but useless clay ovens.
Which brings us to a terrifying bottleneck in the archaeological record, and the full arrival of the Kaliyug.
The transition from the sandy Kal into the Kaliyug is marked by an event that the source text aligns with pinpoint accuracy to modern paleoclimatology. It occurs right around 2200 BCE.
The 4.2 kilo year event.
For listeners unfamiliar with the term, the 4.2 kilo year event was not a localized bad harvest. It was a severe, catastrophic, planetary scale climatic shift.
Modern scientists have studied ice cores from glaciers, stalagmites in caves in India, and sediment layers in the Middle East. All the data points to the exact same thing.
A terrifying global mega drought that lasted for over a century.
And the historical fallout from this was apocalyptic. The physical megastructures could not save the builders.
The text notes, supported by modern archaeology, that this specific drought caused the total sudden collapse of the Egyptian Old Kingdom.
The pyramid builders literally starved and fell into anarchy.
And over in Mesopotamia, the incredibly powerful Akkadian Empire was completely destroyed. They actually tried to build a massive wall, the repeller of the Amorites, to keep starving refugees out, but it failed.
And in India, the mighty glacial rivers that fed those perfect grid cities simply dried up or shifted their courses. Without water, those advanced cities were rapidly abandoned to the desert dust.
From a historical perspective, it is a well-documented civilizational bottleneck. But the text asks us to look deeper at the causality.
Remember the cosmic clockwork. Why did this global drought happen, and what did it fundamentally do to the human operating system?
So we look at the Wi-Fi router. What changed?
According to the source, this cataclysm was mechanically triggered because the sun moved into its closest orbital proximity to the Earth.
The sun gets close, the Earth bakes, the ice caps melt, weather patterns collapse, the rivers dry up. The physical mechanics of that make perfect logical sense.
They do.
But how does that translate to the day-eve? What does getting a planetary sunburn do to the psychological Wi-Fi signal?
The text states that because the sun is at maximum proximity, the Daiv, that baseline cosmic influence, now routes through a specific energetic pathway called the Shivling mark.
Okay, Shivling mark.
And the cosmic entity, or the specific energetic signature that transmits through this pathway, is described in the text as the two-faced Garuda Vishnu.
The two-faced Garuda Vishnu. Now, I need to push back on this a bit because we're blending hard climate data with deep mysticism here. How does a two-faced energy translate into human sociological behavior? Does solar proximity really equal polytheism?
It translates into a psychology of division, multiplicity, and conflict. The influence of this two-faced energy causes human consciousness to fracture its spiritual focus.
Right, because during the Satyug, you had unified expansion. With Abraham, you had the concept of a singular God.
But under this intense, close solar influence, society fragments globally. The worship of multiple deities, polytheism, spreads like wildfire, deeply taking root across all human continents.
So, mapping this out, celestial proximity of the sun near the Earth equals a massive spike in global temperatures and drought.
Yes.
That severe environmental stress causes a psychological shift routed through the shivling marg, resulting in the two-faced Kamuta Vishnu effect, which manifests on the ground as global polytheism.
That is the precise mechanical chain of causality the text proposes. Humanity fractured its spiritual focus exactly at the moment when the physical climate became harsh and aggressively combative.
If you think about it like a global stress test, it makes profound psychological sense. The 4.2K event was the most brutal stress test humanity had faced since the flood.
The rivers vanish. The crops turn to ash. The central governments collapse.
So how do human beings respond to absolute scarcity? They panic. They build massive, aggressive, ironclad armies to fight their neighbors over the few remaining water sources.
And spiritually, they start praying to a multitude of highly specialized gods for survival.
Exactly. You need a god of rain, a god of war, a god of the harvest. The single abstract god of Abraham isn't giving them water, so they diversify their spiritual portfolio.
And the historical alignments for this era, the Tretayug, which spans roughly 2200 BCE to 500 BCE, perfectly reflect that intense stress response.
This is the ultimate era of massive military states and territorial conquest.
You have the Babylonians creating the Code of Hammurabi around 1750 BCE. This wasn't a philosophical text. It was a set of strict, brutal written laws designed to govern large combative populations competing for resources.
Over in the Mediterranean, you have the Mycenaean Greeks and the Trojans engaging in the legendary Trojan War around 1200 to 1100 BCE.
The absolute archetype of the era, a massive clash of empires with a pantheon of specialized gods constantly taking sides and manipulating the outcome.
And in the Indian subcontinent, this period aligns with the Rigvedic period, roughly 1500 to 1000 BCE.
Right, it marks the intensive composition of the sacred Vedas and the establishment of complex rituals to appease various deities representing natural forces.
Which eventually evolves into the era of the 16 Mahajanapadas, 16 great competing kingdoms, from 1000 to 500 BCE. These kingdoms are characterized by massive Iron Age armies engaging in constant, brutal territorial warfare over the Ganges plains.
But even in the midst of all this polytheism, warfare, and empire building, the text meticulously tracks that singular lineage of monotheism that started with Abraham.
It's like a quiet, incredibly resilient thread running through a violent, chaotic tapestry.
The lineage persists despite the dominant cosmic frequency. Abraham passes the mantle to his sons Isaac and Ishmael. From Isaac comes Jacob, the patriarch of the 12 tribes of Israel.
And then right in the thick of this combative Tretayug, roughly between 1400 and 1300 BCE, Moses emerges.
He leads the Israelites out of Egyptian bondage and delivers the Ten Commandments. He reestablishes a hardline code of monotheism in a world completely dominated by idol worship.
And that monotheistic lineage eventually coalesces into geopolitical power with King David around 1000 BCE and his son King Solomon around 970 BCE.
Solomon builds the glorious First Temple in Jerusalem, a massive, singular temple dedicated to a singular god, standing defiantly right in the middle of polytheistic era.
But an era defined by constant warfare and spiritual fragmentation is exhausting. I mean, you can only fight over the same piece of land for so long before someone somewhere stops and asks, is there a different way?
The ancient world doesn't stay trapped in the Tretayug forever. The release valve for that pressure is the second Sandy Call,
The critical transition period between the Tretayug and the incoming Dwapar Yug.
spanning roughly an 1100-year window from 500 BCE to 600 CE.
If the first Sandy Call was the era of building physical megastructures, this second transition operates on a completely different plane. This is the era of the great ideological clash.
It is a millennium defined by an intense, global intellectual conflict between the deeply entrenched systems of polytheism and the rapidly emerging power of monotheism, the power of one God or one unifying philosophical truth.
And the source frames this not just as a timeline of empires, but as a deliberate cosmic battleground of ideas. The historical alignments here are massive. You have Alexander the Great's unprecedented conquests from 384 to 323 BCE.
He marches an army from Greece all the way to India, violently smashing Eastern and Western cultures together.
Forcing an exchange of philosophies, art, theology.
And you have the entire lifespan of the Roman Empire, from its republican transition in 27 BCE to the catastrophic fall of the Western Empire in 476 CE.
In India, you have the rise of the Mauryan Empire. Chandragupta Maurya builds a massive military state, but then his grandson, Emperor Ashoka, does something truly radical.
After a horrific, bloody war at Kalinga, Ashoka is overwhelmed by the carnage. He renounces violence and uses the massive logistical apparatus of his empire not to conquer land, but to spread a singular, unifying philosophy Buddhism across Asia.
Later, you see the Gupta Empire from roughly 320 to 550 CE, India's golden age, a period of immense philosophical synthesis and the formalization of classical Hindu thought.
But while emperors move borders, the true markers of this sandy call are the thinkers, the spiritual leaders born during this highly specific cosmic window.
I really want the listener to pause and think about this from a purely statistical standpoint. Is it merely a historical coincidence that in the 6th century BCE in India you have the birth of Lord Mahavira, laying down the profound ideological foundations of Jainism, emphasizing extreme nonviolence?
And right around the exact same time, roughly 563 to 483 BCE, you have Mahatma Buddha, completely rejecting the rigid, ritualistic hierarchies of his time and bringing a massive spiritual revolution to the East.
The convergence continues. Shortly after, in the 1st century CE, born directly from the established lineage of King David, you have the birth of Jesus Christ in the Middle East.
His teachings established Christianity, taking the core concept of monotheism and opening it up to the absolute masses of the Roman Empire.
The text strongly implies this wasn't a coincidence, right? This 500-year window where Buddha, Mahavira, and Jesus all appear, it was a scheduled cosmic intervention.
The celestial Wi-Fi was shifting its frequencies, and these figures were the new routers, bringing the new societal signal online.
And the ultimate structural culmination of this ideological transition occurs within the Roman Empire itself. Emperor Constantine the Great achieves something monumental.
He takes Rome, the absolute epicenter of ancient state-sponsored polytheism, and he pivots the entire state apparatus toward monotheistic Christianity.
It's a massive top-down victory for the concept of the one over the many. The transition from many gods to one god is viewed as a necessary cosmic evolution occurring everywhere at once.
But just as the previous transition ended in a brutal global drought, this ideological transition ends in something even more dramatic.
Because an idea can conquer an empire, but it cannot stop a volcano. The ideological era ends in literal darkness.
The text identifies the exact breaking point of this sandy call. It marks the precise moment the world officially plunged out of the transition phase and fully into the Dwapar Yuga, and it pinpoints the year 536 CE.
536 CE. For anyone who studies history, that year sends a chill down your spine. Historians literally refer to it as the worst year to be alive in human history.
It was a sudden, global cataclysm, but of a completely different nature than the 4.2K drought. In early 536 CE, a massive volcanic eruption injected millions of tons of ash directly into the Earth's upper atmosphere.
The historical accounts are terrifying. The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote that the sun gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon, during the whole year. People couldn't see their own shadows at noon. It was an 18-month midnight.
The immediate physical result was a severe volcanic winter. Global temperatures plummeted instantly. Summer frost destroyed crops across Europe and Asia, leading to sudden, catastrophic global famine.
Millions starved, and as populations grew malnourished and their immune systems collapsed, it paved the way for the Justinian plague in 541 CE.
This horrific bubonic pandemic swept through the weakened Byzantine and Sasanian empires, permanently crippling the old world order.
The physical reality of 536 CE is a nightmare. But let's look at the cosmic clockwork operating behind the scenes. What is the cosmic driver for the darkness of the Dwapar Yuga?
According to the source, the shift into the full Dwapar Yuga is triggered when the moon moves into its absolute closest orbital proximity to the Earth.
The moon gets super close.
Yes. The text asserts that the intense localized gravitational pull of the moon at this extremely close range is what physically stresses the Earth's crust, leading to those massive world-altering volcanic eruptions.
So the moon's gravity literally squeezes the Earth like a stress ball until the volcanoes pop. That is a terrifying image. But applying our rule of causality, what does this extreme lunar proximity do to the psychological Wi-Fi signal, the Daiv?
The text states that with the moon at its closest point, the Daiv transitions and now routes through a pathway called the Shivlingi Marg. And instead of the divisive two-faced entity of the solar era, human consciousness is now influenced by a singular energy signature. the one-faced Garuda Vishnu, a singular, undiluted focus.
Exactly. Just as the sun's proximity brought heat, division, and polytheism, the moon's extreme proximity brings cold physical darkness, but a singular, concentrated psychological focus, absolute monotheism.
Under this one-faced influence, the concept of a single, all-powerful God stops being just a philosophical debate and spreads rapidly and aggressively across the entire globe. The text's mechanical view of religious expansion is just fascinating.
I really want the listener to visualize the 536 CE volcanic dust veil as a literal physical curtain dropping on a theater stage. Imagine the grand stage of human history. The old actors, the Roman polytheists, the fractured tribal kingdoms, they're all stumbling around in the dark, freezing and starving to death.
And when that dust veil finally clears a few decades later, those old actors are simply gone.
The empires that supported them have collapsed, and a totally new play has begun. It's the era of sweeping, unified monotheism and the rise of massive caliphates.
The historical alignments immediately following the 536 CE cataclysm perfectly illustrate this. Shortly after the dust clears, you have the rapid emergence of Islam under Prophet Muhammad between 610 and 632 CE.
And the text notes that his lineage connects directly back to Abraham's son Ishmael, fulfilling that ancient monotheistic thread.
The spread of Islam during this period is astonishingly fast. Within a century, it unites vast swaths of the Middle East, North Africa, and Asia under a single monotheistic banner.
And because you now have massive, highly organized empires fueled by absolute certainty and a singular truth, it sets the stage for the massive ideological wars of the era, the Crusades.
Spanning roughly from 1096 to 1291 CE, you have massive Christian armies from Europe and massive Muslim armies from the Middle East locked in a brutal centuries-long conflict over Jerusalem.
These aren't just territorial skirmishes. They are two absolute monotheistic superpowers colliding head-on.
The geopolitical map is entirely redrawn. You have the ultimate fall of Constantinople in 1453 CE to the Ottoman Empire, shattering the final remnant of the old Roman world.
In India, the cosmic alignments are just as stark. You see the arrival of Muhammad bin Qasim in Sindh in 712 CE, initiating a permanent Islamic presence.
Leading to the dominance of the Delhi Sultanate and ultimately the founding of the massive Mughal Empire by Babur in 1526 CE.
The leaders of this Dwapar Yug are no longer just kings or warlords. They view themselves as direct defenders of the faith. Powerful caliphs and sultans whose temporal power is derived directly from their role as administrators of a singular god on earth.
It is the absolute zenith of the Dwapar Yug. The power of the One dominates human structure, but the celestial bodies never stop moving.
Right, the moon slowly begins its retreat over the centuries.
And as the moon physically moves further away from the Earth, the era of unquestioned God and kings begins to naturally wane, leading us inexorably into the third Sandy Call.
And this is where the timeline shifts gears into an era that you, the listener, are going to recognize intimately. This is the direct transition into our own modern age. The text places this third Sandy Call between 1643 CE and 2022 CE.
This is the massive transition from the Dwapar Yug into the infamous Kaliyug.
The old world of agrarian empires and absolute religious authority slowly dies off, and it's violently replaced by modern science, technology, democracy, and capitalism. So what is the exact cosmic state during this 400-year transition?
Well, the moon has now retreated to its maximum orbital distance from the Earth. Because it's so far away, its gravitational and spiritual influence drastically weakens.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
Exactly. Into that energetic void, a new cosmic body, or rather a new, highly specific cosmic location, takes primary influence. The text identifies this new influencer as Rahu.
Okay, Rahu. Now, anyone familiar with traditional Vedic astrology knows Rahu as a shadow planet that causes eclipses. But the text does something incredibly bold here. It maps Rahu to a very specific, modern astrodynamic concept.
Yes, the text explicitly identifies Rahu as the L2 Lagrange point.
I really need to unpack this because this is where the text gets brilliantly weird. The L2 Lagrange point is a concept from orbital mechanics. It's a gravitational sweet spot in space located about 1 million miles away from Earth in the exact opposite direction of the Sun.
At this specific point, the gravitational pull of the Earth and the Sun perfectly combine to match the centrifugal force required for an object to orbit with them.
It's an invisible pocket of profound gravitational stability. It's literally where NASA parked the James Webb Space Telescope.
And the text argues a radical thesis here. In the approaching Kaliyug, the Daiv no longer connects to humanity through natural bodies like the sun or moon. Instead, the signal reroutes through this invisible L2 Lagrange point.
And because it routes through this specific point, it connects to humanity exclusively via yantras.
Yantras, translating from Sanskrit meaning machines, instruments, apparatuses, or technology.
The divine or cosmic influence is now entirely mediated through artificial technology. I really had to pause and just stare at the wall when I read this.
That's a lot to take in.
The text is suggesting that the technological revolution of the last 400 years wasn't just humans suddenly getting smarter. It was a physical change in the cosmic Wi-Fi. The signal shifted to the L2 point, and suddenly humanity became obsessed with building and worshiping machines.
It's a wild cyber-spiritual concept.
Think about your own life right now. Are our smartphones, our satellite networks, our reliance on AI, are they just the newest religions dictated by our distance from the moon and the gravitational pull of a point a million miles out in the dark?
It completely reframes the narrative of the last 4 centuries. Look at the historical alignments for this specific Sandy call. It kicks off right around 1687. What happens then?
Sir Isaac Newton publishes the Principia Mathematica.
Yes. He mathematically explains gravity and the laws of motion. He decodes the invisible machinery of the universe, shifting human focus from mystical explanations to mechanical ones.
And that mathematical unlocking directly leads to the Industrial Revolution from 1760 to 1840. We invent the steam engine. The machine becomes the absolute center of human society. Factories replace temples.
Concurrently, the ideological software of humanity receives a massive update. The French Revolution in 1789, it violently dismantles the divine right of kings and replaces it with the cold, legal mechanics of democracy and citizen rights.
The state itself becomes a machine to be engineered, and from there, the acceleration just goes exponential. The 20th century brings World War I and World War II.
Conflicts fought by industrialized meat grinders, tanks, airplanes, automated machine guns.
And ultimately, the atomic bomb. We unlocked the machinery of the atom itself to build the ultimate yantra of destruction.
In India, the text traces this transition brilliantly. It marks the waning days of the old religious era, with Emperor Aurangzeb's rule in the late 1600s, noting his destruction of ancient temples as the last gasps of the old empire model.
Which gives way to the highly systematic, bureaucratic, railway-driven machine of British colonial rule. And finally, Indian independence in 1947 as India joins the global network of modern constitutional nation-states.
Notice how the key figures of this era have changed. The text doesn't list prophets or warlords anymore. It lists thinkers. Albert Einstein, decoding spacetime. Nikola Tesla, mastering electricity.
Karl Marx, attempting to engineer the perfect socioeconomic machine. And democratic leaders like Gandhi and Lincoln, who re-engineered the global legal mindset.
It is an era entirely defined by systems, structures, laws, and technology. But according to the text, this 400-year era of modernity was never meant to be permanent. It was scheduled to hit a brick wall.
Machines need fuel, and systems have absolute limits. And the text claims that brick wall was the year 2022.
This brings us to the most urgent modern section of the document. The text firmly asserts that the third Sandy call, the long transition phase into the full Kaliyug, ended around the year 2022 CE.
So if the text is right, we are currently living in the immediate, chaotic aftermath of this massive cosmic shift. What does the text say happens to the machine age now?
It outlines a terrifying sequence of events, starting directly with the global climate. It points to a massive warming spike that scientists began recording globally right after 2022.
Specifically looking at the terrifying temperature data from 2023 to 2025, which is easily verifiable. We all live through the headlines. The Paris Agreement's 1.5 degrees Celsius limit was functionally shattered.
The text lists the immediate symptoms: uncontrollable heat waves, the melting of polar glaciers, unseasonal rains causing floods, and severe droughts.
But it frames these not just as environmental issues to be fixed with green tech. They are the existential symptoms that mark the end of an era.
And then the text goes beyond our current climate data and predicts the mechanical end of this cycle. It predicts massive global earthquakes and a catastrophic water disaster. But the reason why this happens is the chilling part.
The ultimate cosmic mechanism of the Kaliyug. We established earlier that the moon has been moving away from the Earth. Lunar laser ranging shows it drifts about 1.5 inches further away every single year.
But the text predicts that at the culmination of this transition, the moon will suddenly become stationary. Its slow drift away from the Earth will completely halt.
And if the moon stops moving, the gears of the cosmic clockwork jam. The text explicitly states that when the moon becomes stationary, the daiv, that invisible energetic string that binds human consciousness together, will fully disconnect for a few years.
I know you might push back on this astrodynamically. The moon is a massive rock. Does the text explain how the moon stops physically?
Yeah, I mean, it can't just hit the brakes. Or is it treating the moon purely as a spiritual metaphor to explain societal breakdown?
It treats it as a literal physical event, attributing the cause to the overriding forces of larger cosmic cycles. It argues that modern physics simply hasn't observed the macro forces capable of halting that momentum yet. But it's far more focused on the effect of that halt. If the signal drops, the router unplugs.
And the sociological collapse that follows is absolute. The text asserts that because of this sudden disconnection of the daiv, all modern institutions, our massive armies, the rigid borders of our nation-states, our religious sects, and even the fundamental biological bonds of our families will weaken, scatter, and completely break down.
It is arguing that human society is not actually held together by the rule of law or mutual economic cooperation or even basic human love. Society is held together by an invisible cosmic string of gravity and energy. If the moon's movement stops, that energetic string snaps.
The resulting chaos is a profound internal sociological disintegration. The very concept of what makes a nation or a family simply dissolves in the human mind because the underlying energetic framework supporting those abstract ideas has been turned off.
You wouldn't even have the psychological capacity to organize a government. It is the ultimate systemic failure of the human operating system.
Think about the daily news you consume. Think about the rising temperatures, the extreme weather, the intense, illogical political polarization tearing countries apart, the sheer feeling of societal fragmentation happening everywhere.
Does it feel like a random string of bad luck?
Or does it feel like a massive, complex system running out of energy, slowly breaking apart, exactly as this ancient framework describes?
It's a profoundly sobering thought exercise. But it raises the ultimate question. If the institutions fail, if the climate breaks, if the moon stops, is this simply the end of the human experiment? Does the screen just go black?
If the moon stops, we are effectively marooned. But that guides us to the final and undoubtedly the most mind-bending section of this document. We are moving past the end of the world as we know it and looking at the ultimate transition, the galactic pole reversal.
This final section covers a projected period roughly estimated between 2032 and 2085 CE. And the text introduces a massive, unexpected caveat here. It states that the full, devastating, prolonged dark age of the Kaliyug will actually not happen on Earth this time around.
Wait, what? Why not? We've been following the ticking of this exact clock for 6,000 years. Why does it suddenly skip the ending?
Because of where our solar system currently sits in a much, much larger cycle, the text states that we are currently in the exact middle of a manvantara, a vast epical time cycle spanning hundreds of millions of years.
Okay.
Furthermore, it claims our solar system is currently physically passing through the energetic middle section of the universe. Because of this highly unique intersection of time and space, the normal, localized Prakriti Yuga chakra is pausing.
The gears of the small clock are being overwritten and suspended by a much larger galactic mechanism.
Exactly. Instead of descending into the brutal dark ages of a standard Kaliyug, the Earth is going to experience a massive, accelerated global reset, a total system reboot.
And the cosmic driver for this reboot is no longer just the localized gravity of the sun or the moon. It is a simultaneous geomagnetic and galactic pole reversal.
A galactic pole reversal. We are talking about the magnetic field of the entire Milky Way galaxy physically flipping.
Yes. And what is absolutely fascinating is how the text attempts to anchor this immense spiritual claim using very specific modern astrophysics.
The author explicitly notes that these scientific observations are parallel records. Now, mainstream astrophysics does not officially predict a galactic pole reversal that will reset human society in the next decade.
Right, but the text deliberately uses these real-world anomalies as evidence that our cosmic environment is radically shifting, aligning with the spiritual truth received by the author's guru.
It's using the hard data of modern space telescopes to prove the ancient poetry of the Puranas. Let's unpack the three specific scientific phenomena the text cites. First, it points to Sagittarius A.
Sagittarius A is the supermassive black hole located at the exact center of our Milky Way galaxy, roughly 26,000 light-years away. For a long time, it was relatively quiet.
But the text notes that astronomers have recently recorded sudden, massive, unprecedented radiation fluxes and unexpected X-ray energy bursts emanating from this black hole.
The text argues that this awakening of the galactic center is actively changing the baseline energy flow of the entire galaxy.
Phenomena number 2, the Fermi bubbles.
The Fermi bubbles are a massive astrophysical mystery. They're two gargantuan structures extending 25,000 light years above and 25,000 light years below the center of the Milky Way. Discovered in 2010 by NASA's Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope.
The text points out that recent studies show the cosmic rays and magnetic fields within these immense bubbles are highly volatile and rapidly changing.
It interprets this immense energetic shifting at the galaxy's poles as the physical prelude to a massive galactic magnetic reversal. The energy is winding up to flip.
And finally, phenomenon number 3, which isn't happening deep in space but right here on Earth, the magnetic North Pole shift.
Earth's magnetic North Pole has never been perfectly stationary. But in recent years, its behavior has become erratic. It's begun wandering at record speeds, rushing away from the Canadian Arctic toward Siberia.
The text synthesizes all 3 of these data points: the supermassive black hole flaring, the colossal galactic gamma ray bubbles shifting, and our own planet's magnetic compass spinning out of control.
It argues that this is not a series of unrelated anomalies. It is a synchronized, top-down cosmic reboot. It is taking real, verifiable modern mysteries and interpreting them as the alarm bells of this grand transition.
The text says that during this roughly 50-year gap, between roughly 2032 and 2085, the old rules of the machine age will be completely wiped away.
The Dave will eventually reconnect to Earth, but through a completely new, purified pathway. Entirely new rules for civilization and entirely new methods of connecting with the divine will be established on the other side of this magnetic flip.
It suggests a profound humility. It argues that humanity isn't going to slowly fix its climate problems through better green policy or solve its societal fragmentation through better social media algorithms.
The board is simply going to be flipped by the raw magnetic fields of a black hole 26,000 light years away. I just marvel at the sheer ambition and scale of this theory. To suggest that humanity isn't driving the bus at all.
We never were. We are just passengers, our very thoughts and societies reacting to the shifting gravity of the moon and the magnetic flux of the galaxy.
It requires a complete surrender of that human-centric viewpoint we started with. The idea that human history is the center of the universe is violently replaced by the idea that human history is merely a localized symptom of the universe's grander mechanics.
Which brings us to the end of our journey today. We have covered an immense, almost dizzying scope of time and space.
We started with the floodwaters of Noah, the blank slate of the Kaliyug, and those 88,000 Himalayan rishis preserving ancient knowledge. We watched the pyramids and the perfectly gridded cities of the Indus Valley rise in the first sandy call.
Only to see those same rivers violently dry up during the 4.2 kilo-year event. We saw the brutal physical stress of the Kaliyug birth, massive Iron Age armies, and a multitude of specialized gods.
We saw that polytheism violently clash with the emerging unifying idea of a single creator during the great ideological battles of the Second Sandy Call, championed by figures like Buddha, Mahavira, and Jesus.
We felt the global temperature plummet during the horrific volcanic winter of 536 CE, plunging the world into the darkness of the Dwapar Yug, which birthed the era of massive monotheistic empires and caliphates.
We tracked the moon as it moved away, handing the reins of our cosmic Wi-Fi over to the invisible gravity well of the L2 Lagrange point, birthing our modern age of steam engines, atomic bombs, democracy, and global industry.
And finally, we confronted the impending halt of the moon, the snapping of the energetic string that holds society together, and the ultimate system-wide reset of a galactic magnetic pole reversal.
It is a phenomenal amount of information to process. It utterly shatters that neat, linear, progressive timeline we are taught in school, and it replaces it with a beautiful, terrifying, 6,000-year-old ticking cosmic clock.
Now, I want to leave you, listening right now, with a final thought to ponder as you go about your day.
Exactly. Tonight, when you step outside and look up at the sky and see the moon, or tomorrow morning when you read a news headline about the latest leap in AI, or when you check your weather app and see yet another broken temperature record.
Consider the possibility that you aren't just observing random modern events or the results of human folly.
What if you are watching the massive gears of this ancient mechanism turning right in front of you? What if we are all, right now, living through the final seconds ticking down to a planetary factory reset?
It certainly makes the chaos of the daily news cycle feel profoundly different.
And if that's true, If the Daiv, that invisible cosmic connection that magically holds society, nations, and families together, pauses tomorrow morning, what is the one thing in your life that would hold you together? If the cosmic Wi-Fi drops, what is your internal battery running on?
That's the real question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into this fascinating source material. We will catch you on the next one.